and a very warm welcome from me as well to Day 2 of India Global Week. My name is Edie Lush. What an incredible response we've seen to some of the speakers we've had. We just had the Home Secretary of the United Kingdom, Priti Patel, talking to us about the importance of India in a post-COVID, post-Brexit UK, the UK's new immigration system, and the role of the Indian diaspora. We've also heard from Prime Minister Modi. His address yesterday praised the excellent work of India Inc. in helping to bring India's opportunities to a global audience. And that global audience is exactly what we have listening to these sessions. Over 10,000 registered participants from 69 countries and growing. If you want to share what you hear and see on social media, do use our hashtag, #BeTheRevival, and tag us, India Incorp. So today, I am really pleased now for this session, the 100 Most Influential, the launch of the UK-India Women in Leadership Forum. And we have some fantastic people for you. Baroness Usha Prashar, the chair of the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. Janhavi Dadarkar, she is the CEO and founder of Maiora. Dr. Jyotsna Suri, the chair and managing director of the Lalit Suri Hospitality Group. Poonam Gupta, the CEO of PG Paper, based in Scotland, and Shalini Arora, the CEO of Savannah Wisdom. So I'd like to start with Baroness Prashar first of all. Really lovely to see you all and have you with me today. Can you tell me a little about what you think the barriers to opportunity for women are in building strong collaborative relationships between the two countries?
Well, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in this panel. Before I respond to the question, I'd like to thank India Inc. for actually setting up the Leadership Forum and the fact that last year they published the 100 Influential Women report, which was launched in the House of Lords. And I think it's nice to see all women panel as well. And if I may say so, it's rather FICCI heavy because I am chair of FICCI UK, and Dr. Suri, of course, has been the doyen of FICCI in the UK, and Poonam, of course, her company is a member of FICCI. So I'm really delighted that we have a rather a FICCI domination. That is not to sort of say the other two are not important. Of course they are. In terms of barriers, it's not so much in collaboration. I think that barriers to women's progression are actually quite similar in both countries. One, of course, is the question of the unconscious bias and the assumption people make about women. And then there are, of course, organizational cultures, which impede women's progress, recruitment practices, discrimination, and some entrenched attitudes about the role of women and the kind of working practices. And of course, in India, there is the whole issue of the women in rural areas, with bigger disadvantage, the same way it impacts women in the UK because of poverty in some pockets. So I think there are very similar sort of barriers. And it's important that we look at them in some detail as we progress this discussion. But I'd like to hear from others as to what they think are the barriers as well.
Thank you. So, Janhavi, let's come to you. Maiora, am I pronouncing that right?
Yes.
Okay. And it's a governance strategy, risk mitigation, and training consultancy. I know that you're a corporate lawyer by background and that you've advised over 200 companies and people from private and public sectors, from FTSE 100s to startups. So I wonder if you could answer that same question about the barriers to opportunity and looking specifically, are there any specific issues? I personally know about lots of issues for women, but are there any specific issues that Indian women face?
Okay, so I think Baroness Usha Prashar started this off really well and given some of the really key things. So unconscious bias and cognitive biases within all businesses, within all organisations is something we really need to tackle. If I if I want to say one thing specifically for Indian women that I find is a particular issue, it comes from my own experiences. So yes, I'm a corporate lawyer by background, so I was working in the city. I also did quite a bit of work actually with Manoj Ladwa, because I was a partner with him at MLS Chase. So we were helping UK, Indian, the corridor corporates that were moving from India to UK and vice versa. And I currently sit on 3 boards as a independent chair. And in all of them, I'm the only female. And in fact, I'm the only Indian as well, male or female, on any of those boards. And one of the things I really found difficult, particularly when we were working with the India corridor, there was this perception. So for old India, and what I mean by old India, the sort of traditional mindset, they felt that if you wanted something from the UK, you had to have a grey-haired white man telling you this thing. Now, even though I was the corporate lawyer, the one with the technical knowledge, we had to have a white grey-haired man saying it to us. The second barrier would then be, even for new India, they needed a young, charismatic man doing that chat. So then we'd have Manoj come in. The technical work and the knowledge part was all me. But it was really interesting how people would only listen if it came from certain people in certain ways. So that, I thought, was a real interesting perspective, which I got as I did that. Now, eventually people learn and people do see where the experience is and people do start choosing you. I wouldn't be in the 3 boards that I'm on if people weren't open, because they're fintech, they're technology, and I'm the only female, like I said. So eventually you get through those barriers. But it would be great, for me, the biggest challenge for all of us women, and that's not just for Indian women, that's true across all borders, because I work across the LATAM region and Africa as well, and I do a lot of work in those countries too, with the governments. And the biggest thing that needs to change is mindsets. Mindsets of boards, mindsets of shareholders, and mindsets of stakeholders. So in the corporate world where I'm working with shareholders, we're doing a lot more to actually, we vote against boards where they don't have diversity on the board in the right sense of the word diversity. So mindset change, I think, is the biggest barrier.
Thank you. So let's stay on that idea of the mindset change. I want to come to Poonam Gupta, the CEO of PG Paper, because as an entrepreneur, I've read that you have said that when you first started out, no one would hire you, despite the fact that you had an MBA. Do you think that things have changed, and are they continuing to change as rapidly as they need to in 2020?
Well, I'd like to mention here that I'm born and brought up in India, and I moved to the UK in 2002. So when I came over here, I heard that everybody works here. The UK figures, according to World Economic Forum, is still like 40% women are employed in the UK as opposed to 23%. Well, when I came over, I was so excited. I was like, okay, I'm going to get myself a job. And I couldn't get one because I was told that I was either overqualified for the job I was looking for, or I had no experience in the UK. And after waiting for a while, I started on my own entrepreneurial journey, where I started looking into the recycling industry, which was the buzzword at the time. And I'm the founder and CEO of PG Paper Company, an industry which is still very much male dominated. And I'd say when I entered the industry, I think possibly I was the first woman-led business. So people were curious, and that's where Janhavi's comments were very interesting and kind of resonate with me, where she went into the meeting and she needed a white hair, a gray hair white man, or, somebody who's a man basically representing, even though you held all the technical knowledge. I was exactly the same. People wanted to talk to my father, who wanted to do business with me, or they wanted to talk to Mr. Poonam Gupta, or, when I'd go in for meetings, people would completely ignore me and, continue to look in some other direction. Maybe one of the males who were in the meeting more often than not, it used to be my husband. And it was more because, I just used to sit him down, or he would just sit down out of curiosity. He wasn't even part of the business at the time. And I've kind of gone through that journey, and obviously 17 years in trade now. I do not have to fight those battles anymore because the company has managed to create, I would say, quite a name for itself in the paper industry. We get recognized in the industry as either troublemakers or, innovators who lead in the industry quite from the front. Have the things been changing, in 2020? Well, things have been changing rapidly. But, when you look back at my experience, I was an immigrant in Scotland, new immigrant. Even though I was qualified, it was cited I had no experience in the UK. Things are changing, but whether things are changing for people who are still coming under my circumstances, well, I don't think so, because there are a lot of women I'm mentoring. That change is coming, but that change is slow. I mentor a lot of women, who are in business or professionals from ethnic minorities, Scottish women. And I find, some of us, kind of, we have our own struggles because we take a break because of our children. That kind of pushes us back a little bit in our career, where we then come back into the industry and we try to, get back on that career ladder. And, a lot of corporates are then cynical, wanting to take you on. Well, you've not been in industry for 3 years. I think that's where the industry needs to think differently, perhaps create roles which are more work flexible. I mean, COVID's done a lot of it now. With COVID, people working from their whole home, the flexibility is coming into workplace. I think the industry kind of does need to change their view. I had last year meeting with head of BT, and they were asking me how I do things differently in my company, because they thought there was much more inclusivity in my company, whether it was, in terms of diversity, whether, the fact is my company is 69% female, still, which I feel really proud of. And there is no gender pay gap at all. I mean, I don't even understand in my own organization, why would a manager, same manager who's a male or a female would get paid differently. And I guess that's where, more of us need to speak up and be those role models of tomorrow who are willing to talk about what happened and how it happened to us and how is it changing and how are we going to be the change makers, bringing the future on for our children. For example, I've got 2 daughters. How do I want to see that change coming? Thank you.
Thank you. I got used to being called Eddie, in fact, when I moved here 22 years ago to the United Kingdom from the United States. So I'm right there with you. Dr. Suri, let's come to you now. You're the past president and the chair of the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry in the UK. And you're also the chair and managing director of Bharat Hotels, that runs the luxury hotel chain Lalit under the Lalit Suri Hospitality Group. So I wonder if you could talk a little more about the opportunities for women within the tourism sector. Specifically, I'm worried in a post-COVID world about the impact of tourism and how this might impact women in this sector.
Well, namaskar to all of you. I'm sitting in Delhi, lovely warm day here, something that all of you are looking forward to always. The tourism industry, we're actually completely mangled, if I can use that word. We got impacted way before the COVID pandemic actually hit out. And we will probably be the last ones to actually recover from this. For us, it's been this entire experience, unprecedented completely. But for this industry, it's really, really been a turning point. We're all introspecting to try and figure out what is the future of our industry. This is an industry where people serve people. And if we are going to have social distancing or physical distancing, how are we going to ever get back to a restaurant which is buzzing with people, a nightclub which is shoulder to shoulder, a large Indian wedding, big fat Indian wedding, meetings, and even just luxury and spa. I mean, if you are in a spa, and India is very well known for the Ayurvedic spas, how do you cope up with the masseur or the masseurs with you where is the distancing that comes in? So as an industry, we are really distraught. But if I were to put that aside for the moment and talk to you about what are the opportunities for women in this industry. So let me just tell you that and I'll talk specifically about India, most of the Indian employed women are actually are employed in the unorganized sector. They don't have paid jobs. So let me put it like that. And they are contributing immensely to this industry. Now, if you talk about a small roadside dhaba, as we call it in India, you will find that of the 4 people working there, at least 3 will be women, but it's unorganized. When it comes to the organized sector, which I'm a part of, we do have a fair representation of women, but very few women in the leadership roles. So while there's housekeeping, there's front office, there's sales, and there's a lot of women representation. If I put a ratio, India, it's about 12% only ratio of women working in the organized sector. But what have I done in my own company is that I've actually took it upon myself to bring in that ratio. And we're currently sitting at 18%, which is a lot better than what the ratio of India is. However, when it comes to the leadership roles, that's where it begins to fall back. And you know, as was mentioned earlier, the women or the girls, young girls, they get married and they take a sabbatical for 3 years. But in those 3 years, the men have actually climbed up that ladder. So when they come back, there is that setback that they get. I mean, they may be probably better, more devoted to their job, perhaps even more knowledgeable, but they've lost that time. And therefore the struggle comes up for them to catch up with the men. And that's the main reason why in our industry, I find that the women begin to miss the leadership roles. But I have to say very proudly that I have 3 women executive chefs in our hotel, which is literally a record, and a fairly large number of women in leadership roles. The barriers, as was mentioned earlier, you know, it's the mindset. It's really the mindset, and it's the mindset of everyone, of parents, of siblings, of the male members of your family. There's a mindset change that is required, and it's the same everywhere. I mean, there's no difference. Let me tell you, whether it's in India or whether it's in America or it's in the UK, I think the mindset is what really needs to change. And if we, all of us here, can be in any way a catalyst to that mindset, I think we'll have achieved something. So thank you for that.
Thank you. So Shalini Arora, let's come to you now, the CEO of Savannah Wisdom, which is a foundation committed to social change for a better world, which is what we need right now. And so I wonder if you can tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that changing mindset and what Savannah Wisdom and you do through that and the B&M Community Fund in order to change.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I think that's a really interesting comment there about the change in mindset. And a lot of the other panelists have talked about the pull factors in terms of getting women into the workplace. But I think, and our research has demonstrated, that we do also need to look at the push factors. And that comes from parents, from communities, and from perception. Evidence shows that women from the BAME community are 20% less likely to be employed than their counterparts in the UK. And we know that girls consistently outperform boys in compulsory education and are more likely to go to university. So why this disparity in the labour market? As a foundation, we conducted some research here in Manchester with young women aged 16 to 24 to try and work out what those factors are. And there are cultural factors still, and that's the mindset, amongst other things, that needs to change to tackle those barriers. Some of those cultural factors were parents not being aware about different career opportunities or still believing that the medical profession is the only worthwhile career for their daughters. And we've not really made progress in that mindset between the generations. Girls themselves do also lack the confidence and the self-belief to think that they can achieve something different and step outside the box and have an alternative career to the ones that they see within their communities, whether it's a teacher or a doctor or a police officer, because they lack meaningful role models, realistic role models, where they think, well, if that person can do it, then I can as well. So there are lots of different things that we have discovered through our research, which are happening within the community still. And those are the mindsets that we believe we need to change as well. Building skills, increasing confidence, and really speaking to parents and to people within the communities about the opportunities for young women in this country.
Thank you. Baroness, I wonder if you could build on that, what you've just heard there in terms of the concerns about the push factors. And I wonder if you could also touch on the issue around whether remote working and digitization creates new opportunities that we may not have seen before.
Indeed. I think we've had a really good contributions, and I think all the issues that have been raised, both in terms of mindset, pull and push factors, are very critical. But it's also encouraging that the steps are being taken, particularly by women themselves, to actually, promote other women. But I think, having said that, the progress, in my view, has been slow. It's been slow because I think we've not seen a change, a paradigm shift, and a change in the mindset. And some of the cultural factors actually remain very much in play. The cultural factors are there, but I do think that one of the things I want to highlight is the domestic responsibilities of women. And particularly when it comes to taking time off to have children, they begin to lag behind, not just the tourism industry. I saw that in the legal profession, I've seen that in the civil service. So I think there's a whole range of issues which actually impact on the progress of women. When you're looking at, in terms of, are there opportunities on the digital platform? Of course there are. I think what the pandemic has done is actually amplified where the real issues are. And I think that highlights where we need to focus, because the title of this conference is, Be the Revival. If we want to be the revival, we've got to make sure that women are an integral part of this. While I think digital working and working from home will provide flexibility in terms of work, but I think we cannot take that for granted. We will have to ensure that people are given the necessary skills. There's a real change, a mindset and a shift in the way we work, because I think the working patterns are such, they're designed the way men work. They do not really take into account the conflict that there is between internal and external responsibilities of women. So while there are opportunities, and I think these have been highlighted in the pandemic, but I don't think that we can sit back and say that will automatically happen. I think this will mean that we need to think of strategies. And what has frustrated me is that we've had this conversation and dialogue for a very, very long time. We've had report after report which tells you there's dismal progress. But what we really need to do now is make that step change where we begin to impact on policy and thinking, because there's a whole range of initiatives, there are a whole range of projects, which are really significant and are making some difference. We need to scale this up and make sure these actually impact on the way policies work. So I would emphasize that even on the digital and the technological impact, of course, the potential is enormous. But it's a huge potential, especially here and here in the UK. But it needs to be exploited. To do that, you've got to make that a very conscious effort of every action you take in education, in policy, in any initiative that you take forward.
Poonam, I wonder if you could build there on what we heard from Baroness, because as an employer of a lot of women, you must have seen some of the frustrations that they faced over the last 100 days and more of educating their kids at home, continuing to have to look after the family while working over a digital platform. Anything to add and any bright highlights that you can tell us?
Well, some of the points that, the Baroness has said, they're actually really, really relevant. Now, going back, to these 100 days, let me tell you a little bit that actually for the first 12 years of starting my own business, I worked from home. And my pull to work from home was the fact that, I have two daughters, who came along very soon after I started my business. And motherhood in itself is a full-time job. So being a CEO and a founder of a company, as if that's not a full-time job, then, being a mother of two children, and actually during that period of time when my older one was just 1 year old, I was also wheelchair bound for a year and a half with a misdiagnosed disease. So I've kind of been in the thick of all of that, working from home, juggling my work life, my children, my family responsibility, coming from, I'm part of an Indian family, Indian joint family actually in Scotland, where there are a lot of pressures also as a daughter-in-law on, the responsibilities that I have for the household. So I think I've kind of seen it all and have gone through it all. And when I've done all of that, I guess it, as a CEO of my company, I have a natural understanding of what women in my business or my friends, who are looking to get into a profession, or people who ask me for help in terms of mentorship, I kind of understand their struggles, because their struggles have been my struggles. And that makes me a little bit more. So let's talk about, so that kind of allows me and to understand their requirement, which I understand are different from the male employees or even, management that I had. And one thing my company's always done pre-COVID as well, for last 17 years we've been in existence, is allowing for that flexibility. Initially, it was meant to be for women, mothers who are trying to come back into job. Again, Baroness Prashar and both Dr. Suri mentioned it, how women basically get kind of left behind when they take this time off, trying to bring up their young family. And I recognize that, because although I worked with my children, I had that, you can say, opportunity to work from home, being the owner of my business. Now, that's not something that an employee can say that they can have. So so I basically started trialing with, having a finance director who had children who were under 4 years of age, and see if I could provide her that flexibility to work from home, and eventually kind of shifted to the men in my company as well, because actually as a young father, they are now expected to share responsibilities, and they should. And they can do that when we also understand their requirements in that area. So actually, if you think about my company, which has already been geared for last 17 years, with giving people flexibility, people already working from home, offices in different countries where people, are set up to work from home. We were kind of, you can say, a little bit, we didn't take the full blow of COVID, as such, and this sudden think about working from home. Our systems were already set up. The support system was already in place. Where we struggled a little bit with our employees, I would say it was mainly the men in the company, because they were suddenly home, and, they had the children running around, and, they couldn't cope with it, and they couldn't be productive, as they would say, because too much happening in the household. And, we just try to provide them support through, their managers, Zoom calls, telling them how they can try and, find that work-life balance. Most of the women in my company, actually, a lot of them are young mothers, but, they've already have had that support. So it's kind of, and, they're used to working, with our work culture that we have during. So, that kind of actually helped them in a positive way, I would say, during COVID. They were able to kind of juggle their responsibilities like they did. So, I mean, I don't have any exciting stories to tell you, but I'm proud to say that, my females in my team remained highly productive even in these most difficult last 100 days.
Interesting. So, Janhavi, can you build on that a little bit? Because I know that you're an independent chair on the board of a fintech. Do you think we see enough women in senior positions? And is it representative of the talent that's out there?
Well, definitely not representative of the talent. I can give that answer very quickly. But I do want to take a slightly contrary view to something that Shalini said about cultural, and indeed maybe we've all said it slightly. I think when we look at Indian cultural factors, even within India, that is a continent within itself. So in a way, sticking BAME together, I think, actually skews the statistics completely wrongly. I mean, Priti Patel, who just preceded us, is a great example of somebody that has got to places I think partly because of her Indianness personally. And personally, if I had to speak for myself, this idea that one of the barriers is having kids and all of this, actually, for me, Indian culture helped me. The family helped me. I didn't take any time off. I mean, for anybody that's had to work in the corporate world and in the technology world, that Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours is critical. To do that 10,000 hours before a certain age is so critical. And that's true for all of us. But for women, you're quite right. If you take that gap, you don't get those 10,000 hours. So for me, actually being Indian helped. Both my parents were doctors. And it was fantastic to watch them because they jointly looked after my kids for me, even though they worked. And I actually, a lot of my female friends that come from non-Indian cultures say to me, I wish my parents had done that for me. And it's just not inherent in that. So I actually think sometimes moving away from our own inherent culture, so that this idea of be the revival, I actually think rather than technology, I think what COVID has given us the opportunity to do is reevaluate societal values on so many levels. And I hope that's what we really get. Certainly, again, in the corporate world and in the technology world, where we're talking to shareholders, where we're talking to stakeholders, for me, building sustainable and resilient narratives are so important. And if you want to build sustainable narratives, you need women in leadership because it is so inherent to the way we think. You know, we don't, for me, when I look at my businesses that I'm in or any of the companies, I'm not just thinking about the next quarter and the dividends at the end of the next year. I'm thinking about what happens for my kids, what happens for my grandkids when I'm doing this. And that ability to think long term, I think needs to be embedded in organizations. And if you get more women doing that, I think that helps. Technology has been both, for me, it's been both a positive but also a negative, because in this lockdown what I'm seeing is that what you're getting is social bubbles and an increased amount of echo chambers that are happening. And actually I do a lot of board evaluations, and one of the things I've realized when I've listened to decision making in boards at the moment, what's happening is you have at least 20% less time. You're doing it virtually. And what you're doing is you're reacting to a lot that is being said on chatter. There's so much noise out there. And I think people are not really looking at this from the perspective. I hope what we do is really reevaluate where society sits on all of this. And what we need is men. I mean, some of the things that we've instigated in our organisation is forced paternity leave and sharing of time off once kids have happened. So both the parents, and once you get men taking time off, once you get men coming back part-time, it's amazing how they suddenly realise what the difficulties were. And the other thing I'd really want to stress in this is, unfortunately, certainly in the Indian culture, a lot of what has happened is exactly Poonam's experience, where because they couldn't do it as an employee, they end up setting their own business up. And so we've had we have a lot of entrepreneurs that are women, and they've set up their own business. But actually what I do want to see is if we can reevaluate actually how we do our practices in organizations, what we will get is women rising to leadership because it's the right thing to do. It is absolutely for organizations and for societies the correct thing to do. This is not just about pushing people into a field that they don't necessarily want to go to. And the final point I wanted to make about that is actually women at home are of huge value to society as well, and we shouldn't devalue that either. And I think almost part of the problem with this is that we don't put a value on that. And it's interesting, once men have started working from home, we've suddenly started putting a value on it. So I think that's one of the things we really need to change.
Time, and I do want to get our final two panelists another chance to come back in. Thank you for those comments. Dr. Suri, can you comment on whether you think that an Indian family can actually be of more help to women? And I wonder if you can comment on the digital aspect. How does that work within a tourism sector?
So I definitely think that the Indian family values are extremely helpful because if you are living in a joint family and you have supportive, I mean, of course, they have to be supportive, then you do not necessarily have to take a very long sabbatical. But if you are a nuclear family and you are just, yourselves and your husband, then it becomes a natural choice for the woman to take the sabbatical. Coming back to the digital platform, so in our industry, we really can't work from home because we have to be out there in the field. A certain amount, for example, sales or some element of marketing can be done, but the chef has to be on board. The service boy and girl have to be there. The housekeeping has to do the rooms, and all of that. So for us, it's really been extremely difficult for us to even hold on to people because making them sit at home, they're not really that productive. But they are, like I said, some segments are, but the bulk of the segment are really not being able to be productive. So it's different. However, I do feel that the opportunity of being able to work from home has clearly benefited the women across the world. It really has, without any pressure on them of the children, of home, and the duties that they need to perform at home. They've actually become doubly productive. As was mentioned, that women, what they have been able to contribute to this pandemic is not being measured properly, because not only have they contributed to their homes, but they've also contributed to their work. So I think that from that point of view, yes, the pandemic has helped. But in our industry, no. Working from home.
Not possible. I'm just going to give Shalini the final word. Can you just reflect on what you've heard from the panel? And perhaps one final question to you would be even better if. So how could you see things in 5 years better than they are now?
Okay, just to reflect on what the panel have said. Janhavi, I take your point about using statistics from the BAME community to make my points, and I'm going to use another one, that on average, women from the BAME community take home £90 less per week than their white counterparts, and we don't have that data split out between the different communities. And that would be my worry about the increased flexibility in working from home and the digitization that goes with that, because I worry that without addressing some of the first points that were made about unconscious bias and some of these cultural inequalities that we see, that there is a risk of that divide and that gap actually increasing as women take up some of those lower paid jobs within the gig economy and also try and still do it all and have their families and then work all hours. And that is going to have an impact on their mental health and their stress levels. So I do think there is a risk as we come out of this and we think about what a fabulous opportunity and there is to be more flexible with our working hours and how digitization has helped that. There are some serious considerations that also need to be made. Sorry, Edie, what was your final question?
Well, we've run out of time, so I think we'll just leave it there. But it is my great thanks to all of you for being such an empathetic and listening panel. You've all really responded to what I've heard, which is sometimes quite different than what we hear on a manel, as we all know. By the way, during this panel, my Ocado order has arrived, and my family has done the job of taking all that food in. So, there is hope for us all. So enormous thanks to all of you for being with us here today, and do continue to stay in touch.
Thank you, Edie.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to see you all.